So what we're doing, we're going to put the sidewall on, get that ready. Got one vertical up there right now. And so after you've measured it, that's from the ground to the bottom of your hoop. And you have the level in there to make sure it's just right, mark it. And I came up here a few inches, about 5 inches. And what I did here, just cut your tabs. And you could use mending plates if you want. This is just a little easier, less expensive. But just cut the tabs. This tab's going to go on that side of the hoop, and you'll see that in a sec. So you can just pound that. Perfect. And then go ahead and put it into position. Now look at the ground for a sec. What you'll notice is these are 18-inch pieces of 3/4 inch tube, and half-inch, 3/4 inch, doesn't matter, but as long as it's smaller than the inside of this. And by putting those in, it saves you the time from having to dig down and be able to place these in the ground. Just pound in 18-inch piece posts. You're going to argue, well, what about frost heaves, things like that? The reality is, in a greenhouse, one, it's a lot warmer on the inside, and two, this is not a structural or load-bearing wall. The actual load of the greenhouse is on the hoops itself. So this framing has to be strong enough to withstand the wind and also hold your doors, things like that. The other thing to keep in mind is you're going to be bringing this up, the grade up about 4 inches when you're done. So it makes sense doing it this way, even with 18-inch pieces of steel. You can go longer if you want, but it works. I haven't had any issues with it. So let me show you here. I went a little longer. The reason I went a little longer is I like to drive these posts in the ground. So I'm going to go do that right now. Let me get that. This is a magnetic level, really handy to have when you're building a greenhouse. So I just want to get a ballpark of where it is. So we're right about there. So I'm just going to pound that in a few inches. I made this, like I said, about 5 inches longer than it needed to be, just to make sure we had some room. I'm going to drive it in a little farther here. So these tabs that we cut, you can see I brought it down. It's like a 1/4 inch under. It's not a big deal. But these tabs, you just kind of go around them like that. And then screw those right into place and it'll be perfect. So let's make sure it's level. It's perfect right there. Now I'm not going to screw them in at this point. Let me show you something else to do. What we want to do is we want to be able to put a hoop end vent here. So to do that, I want to make sure that this one's level. We already fastened that one. That was the first upright on this wall. This is the second, but I want these to be parallel. Framing is going to make a big difference if the base of that to that and to this, those two dimensions are the same. And the easiest way to do that is just go ahead and cut a piece and mount it for our vent right now before we tie this in, before we screw it in. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece, take a measurement down there, cut it to that size, bring it up here, and then I know both of these are going to be level and everything's going to be square. Okay, so we just cut this to the gap at the bottom, about ready to mount it, and we went ahead and mounted an L bracket on that side over there. I'm just going to temporarily put a screw in because I need something to hold the tail into this when I'm setting it there, make sure it's level. So I'm going to put the screw a little lower so I have room to work. And then I'll go ahead and mount that so I figure out where level is. There you go. So right now you saw that I had to push this over a little bit. Now the distance there is even with that. I'm not going to make any mistakes in doing it. That's the whole process of doing that. So now let's go ahead and make this centered up or level. It has to go quite a ways by the looks of things. It's actually pretty good right there. So just as a placeholder, I'm going to go ahead and mark that there while I get things ready. Just about right. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and hook up the L bracket. So I want the L bracket to be right about there. So that will work perfect right there. Something like this. These L brackets just have 2 holes, but I put a 3rd one in at the top just to make sure it's a little bit more rigid on something critical like this. And the other thing to keep in mind, these L brackets, they're a couple millimeters wider, and I actually went over a little too far on this, but you don't want it sticking out on your polycarbonate side, so push it in a little bit so it's flush. At the very least, it's flush, and that way you don't have any problem scratching up your polycarbonate or anything when you're mounting it. It should all still be level. I'm going to double check though really quick. Yeah, it's actually pretty good. It'll work just fine. So we'll just make sure this is flush here. Perfect. It's going to work. Now I'll just go in from the bottom. Perfect. Yeah, it looks good. Go ahead. So if you end up doing it this way, cut these tabs out of the steel, you can put the screw on this side. Just make sure that it's not going to impact the polycarbonate. So in this case, it works perfect up on top. There it goes. And that way it's out of the way. You'll have a little spacer here, so it's not going to intersect that. Go ahead and just put a couple in this tab here. Perfect, all done. That thing is as rock solid as it gets. I'm going to show you how we frame this end up a little bit more. So the vent's going to be up there on top, and then we have these 3 uprights going. Notice this one up at the top. I've not fastened it yet, and the reason for that is I've cut this one and this one, they're the same length, and that way you can make sure everything works out pretty well. It's not going to be sloppy going to lean one way or the other. So let me just show you how to complete that. I'm going to fasten this on here really quick. This is located halfway between the bottom and the top, so it's right where I want it there. I'll go ahead and tighten it in now. And now we'll go ahead and make this one the same height based on this datum down here. The datum down here, actually, it's not perfect. When you're screwing in at the bottom, you have those ground posts and they kind of move a little bit. So I'm just going to use the level on this one. Be a little easier if I do that. So we'll just lift it up a little bit here, down I guess. Perfect. So we'll put in the L brackets later, but I'm going to get 2 screws in here just so it doesn't move. That should suffice. Now what'll happen is this level will go all the way over to the door. We're going to put a door here, but this is going to go all the way over at this height and at that height as well. So that will allow us to have a nice, even, and a fairly easy project to put together. Now you notice we need to put this up now. So at this point, this is constrained. So we can just get like a mending plate or something in there and get that into place. I'll go do that really quick. I'll just use a mending plate. Comes together quick. Now on this, one thing to keep in mind, this is your vent opening, so you don't want to protrude anything into your vent opening. So just be really cautious about that. That includes corner braces as well. And I'll put one more in to make sure it's structurally in place. And later on, what we can do is we'll go ahead and put L brackets in to make sure it's really rigid. That way there's no problems.